Hello, welcome to another Monday. I'm Sally Ducharme. The chart that's caught my attention this week is a chart of former South Carolina governor, former UN ambassador Nikki Haley, who's the first person to throw her hat into the ring to challenge Donald Trump for the Republican nomination for president in 2024. So one thing that's interesting about her chart is that she was actually born on January 20th, Inauguration Day. So we'll pull up her chart. Unfortunately, we don't have a time chart. I'm hoping if she gets some traction, some enterprising astrologer will get a birth time for her. But in any case, I'm looking at the chart just to examine who is this person, what are her chances, leaving politics, political positions, views completely out of it, just the planets and the aspects. And one interesting thing about her chart right off the bat is that not only was she born on Inauguration Day, but she was born at a very important point in the sky right now. 0 degrees Aquarius was the point of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020, which began a bold new cycle in Aquarius, which lasts for 20 years. And so anyone born with their sun around this point it's almost like they're kind of wired up to be part of whatever is going on and moving us forward over the next 20 years. Pete Buttigieg, who's currently our Secretary of Transportation, also was born, I think, on January 19th. So his chart and Nikki Haley's chart are two charts I kind of put aside to think, okay, let's look to see what happens to them as we move forward through this Jupiter-Saturn cycle. Nikki Haley was born the day that the sun moved into Aquarius. So we don't know for sure if she's 29 Cap or if she's 0 Aquarius. But in any case, that conjunction is very close to that sun. Another thing that we can notice about her chart is that the ruler of either a Capricorn or Aquarius sun would be Saturn, which is in trine. It's 29 degrees of Taurus. And so this tells us that her sun's ruler in harmonious aspect with her sun, that she would have the resources she needs, that she would be very ambitious, and that she would be able to work very hard to plot and plan and to set up a program of how she's going to accomplish something. And of course, she's come very, very far in her life. And so this is one thing that's very strong in her chart. Notice also she's got that Mercury in Capricorn as well. So this is somebody who can study very hard. I imagine I'm sure from her biography, we know she was an excellent student in school. And so this is somebody who can study a situation, analyze how she needs to proceed. So very strong. When the Mercury's in the same sign as the sun, it brings focus to the ambitions, what the person is attempting to do. But another interesting thing about her chart is that she's got Mars in the sign of Aries. So it's highly dignified in Aries. It rules Aries. So this is somebody who's bold, innovative, a risk taker, someone who is not particularly patient. And so you can see she's got those sort of conflicting impulses in her character, like, I'm going to jump in right now. Notice she's kind of first to jump in way before the primaries to challenge Donald Trump. But she's also got that square energy. You want to look for somebody who's highly ambitious and accomplish a lot in life. We think of as having a lot of squares and possibly oppositions in their chart because they have that dynamic energy. She knows how to wait and she knows how to seize the moment. Both energies are there in her. And I like that she's got a very close square between Mercury and Mars in her chart. I imagine she was a killer debater in high school and college, but also she could be very quick with the retort. I don't know if you remember, while she was UN ambassador, someone in the Trump administration said, "Oh, Ambassador Haley must have gotten very confused about this." And she just came right back with all due respect, I do not get confused. So I just love that sort of indication of how she can kind of take a challenge and just verbally just really throw it back at someone. So very strong then, Mars in Aries there. And another planet that's very strong in her chart, though, is this Jupiter in Sagittarius. Jupiter is in its own sign of Sagittarius. So this tells us a strong sense of justice, fairness, respect for the law, interesting governance, how we're putting a society together to create a society that's fair and just for all. And one thing that's interesting about this Jupiter is that she also has some strong Pisces planets. Venus is exalted in Pisces, and the moon, unless she was born almost at midnight on January 20th, would be in Pisces as well. So you can see there's that square between the Sagittarian energy, which is strong in her chart, and then that Pisces energy. So you think of someone in Sagittarius, we want to create this strong, just society for everyone. But Pisces, excuse me, is more like universal compassion. Who are the people who fall outside the law and outside the boundaries of the law? How are we going to help them, or how are we going to include them? So you can see that for someone interested in governance, that they would have this impulse in their chart that we're going to create this structure, but yet how is it going to serve those that the structure is created for? Also, you think about Sagittarius and Jupiter both indicating other cultures. And Nikki Haley is first generation American. Her parents came from India, and she was born in Bamberg, South Carolina, because her father was a university professor there. And so she's someone who grew up with parents who were very rooted in their culture in India. They were Hindu. But yet she was growing up, in a South Carolina town, very much part of the U.S. type of traditional experience you would think of. So she has that kind of conflict between the home, that moon, indicating, that where she found warmth and comfort was in contrast to the kind of structures of the world around her, like when she went to school. So you can see that that's another conflict that is present in her chart. And it's even interesting, she married a man who was Christian and had children, and eventually she would change religion. She would become Christian rather than Hindu, because she wanted to have the same religion as her husband and raise their children in the same religion. And so that's another interesting conflict between her kind of moon heritage roots and then the world that she's living in the present, working in her chart. Isn't it interesting how we've got squares, we see these conflicts within us, and we have to find out a way to embrace both. When Nikki Haley was asked, well, do you want your parents to convert from Hindu to Christianity? She said, I just want my parents to do what's ever right for them. I'm doing what's right for me. So she's recognizing that the journey she's on is hers uniquely. And she's not really proselytizing a certain religious view. She's just doing what she felt was best for her marriage and her family. So another interesting thing about her chart. And then also, this tells us that she is somebody who's kind of fluid and adaptable, because both Sagittarius and Pisces are mutable signs, so very adaptable. And then you add Venus in here, which is in Pisces, and Venus in Pisces is exalted. Is one thing that's kind of interesting about her biography is that her mother had a clothing store, a dress shop, in the town where she grew up. And she grew up working in her mother's dress shop. And in fact, her first job out of college was as her mother's accountant at the dress shop. So I just think very Venusian things present in her life, really from the time that she was a child. That creating, you think about Pisces as being kind of an artistic, creative sign. So creating beautiful clothes for people to wear, so selling people clothes through her dress shop. And she herself presents as a very lovely lady, beautiful hair, makeup, clothes. Um, so you can see how that Venusian aspect is strong in her life as well. But also you think in Pisces, getting the support that she needs to move forward with whatever her hopes and wishes are in her life. And of course, anyone running for political office has to be able to get that sort of physical support through money from donors. So being able to attract people who want to help are important with that Venus in Pisces. So we've looked now at, we've taken the Hellenistic challenge now. And so let's look at her chart with the outer planets and see what they add to the picture. Because she's was born as Pluto was entering Libra, which is, as if you can kind of picture with her sun, would be trining her sun. And so we've got this Pluto in Libra here. But however, let's look first at this Uranus in her chart. So what is Uranus doing? Remember, we talked about that that square that she has from Mars up to the Capricorn planets. In fact, Mars kind of falls at the midpoint when you shoot a ray up there between the sun and Mercury. But also, what is Uranus doing? Notice it's in opposition to her Mars in her chart. So this adds more electricity to whatever is a pretty dynamic chart. This is somebody who Mars and Aries kind of looking for opportunity. She would have that kind of sense of, okay, the moment is right. Let's grab that lightning in a bottle and go for it. But also because this is an opposition, she is able to kind of look at both sides of something, and she's able to argue. She's able to confront the other and make her point of view clear. You can see that with Mars in Aries. But Uranus over here in Libra, other points of view, and sometimes very challenging and unexpected things coming up. If you read about her two terms as governor in South Carolina, she faced very many challenging situations where her point of view was challenged. And so she is adept at dealing with that duality and oppositional structure through her, if we look at up here in Capricorn, through her political career. Also, you think of someone who's able to look at people who are arguing about something and then make a decision, which is what an executive often has to do. So like we said, when we look at a chart of someone who's very successful, squares, oppositions, important. A T-square really puts a lot of fuel into the chart. So that T-square working with that Uranus, super important in her chart. Neptune is doing something a little bit different, though. Notice it's an exact square to that Venus in Pisces. And so here's kind of the softer square, but yet still a challenge that this Venus wanting to get support and help. Neptune in Sagittarius could be that maybe the structures aren't quite there, that there's a dissolution going on around the government or the administration or something. You think about the power structures or just the systems of thought that we have to rule. So going back to that, our structure serving people, but also is she getting the support she needs from the structures around her? And by structures, I don't mean something like Capricorn, but more like just the ideas, the laws, the philosophy. It could be that she's been confronted through a certain prejudice against her because she's the child of an immigrant and she's East Asian. So that could be something that she's had kind of undermine her, undercut her. I don't know if you remember, she was just UN ambassador for not much more than a year or so. And I think she kind of realized that there was, stuff going on in the Trump administration, not super comfortable with, and she managed to make a graceful exit, I think even before she'd served 2 years, because realizing, this being part of this is not really helping my career and supporting me. So that's what Neptune is doing in the chart. But the one that we really want to look at is Pluto. Because Pluto here is, when she was born in 1972, we were almost at a Saturn-Pluto trine. I think about 1972, looking back, and how Saturn and Pluto were kind of working more harmoniously together. Once Saturn moved into Gemini, which it's just about ready to do, this is when the anti-war movement was really taking off. The war wouldn't end for 3 more years, but there was a lot of the progress that had been working on during the 60s started coming to fruition in 72. It was gay rights were becoming stronger, a stronger voice. Women's movements were becoming stronger. So she's kind of on the cusp of this Saturn Pluto trine coming into her own chart. The only thing is, a trine, you think about being kind of stable. But in this case, because Saturn is still in an earth sign in Taurus that likes to accumulate, likes to build, and then we've got Pluto in Libra here, which is growing power through connecting with others. So there's a bit of a wobbly nature to it. That is not until a few months later, when Saturn comes into Gemini, that we're going to have that beautiful air connection between the two. So you can see that even though there's something positive forming here, it's not quite there yet. You think about Taurus as being kind of hidebound and caught in the past or the way things have always been done. We've got Pluto here in Libra, in air, wanting to make those connections that can transform the world, make it easier for people to talk to each other and respect each other. And so that kind of tension is kind of baked into her chart as well. And so then we put it into a trine, and this is when I would love to really know, is she a Capricorn or is she an Aquarius, to show which side is she following. Is she really more 29 Cap, trine Saturn in 29 Taurus? So really wanting a more conservative approach, staying with the way things are? Or is she an Aquarian sun in trine to that Pluto in Libra, looking forward, transforming the way things are, the way things are going to be? So interesting question as we look at her chart. But this kind of comes back now to, okay, well, what are her chances of becoming the next president of the United States, or even of winning the nomination? And so one thing that's happening in her chart is Saturn is going into Pisces very soon, next month, in fact. And so Saturn in Pisces, notice it's going to be throughout 2023 and then early 2024, crossing that Venus in Pisces. Venus, you think of what's bringing her the support, what she needs from others to do what she wants. It's restricting it. Also notice that it sets off that Venus-Neptune square in her chart natally. So I was thinking, looking at that she could have some hopes and some expectations for support that might not materialize as Saturn crosses that point in her chart. We have Jupiter right now is in Aries. So you can see it's crossing that Mars, making her bold and daring, wanting to jump in first. But I always think of when Jupiter squares something in our chart, it can make us a little over optimistic. And so Jupiter over the next few months until May is going to be squaring that Mercury and that Sun in Capricorn. So those are all some things that I'm thinking, oh, I'm not so sure about her chances moving forward. But also, as we look at as we go into later this year, Jupiter is moving into Taurus. And you think, well, that's super for her Capricorn planets, but it's not doing a whole lot for her natal Jupiter. And it's also, as it comes closer to that Saturn, is going to eventually meet Saturn around the spring of 2024, when the primaries are in full gear and things are shaking out, and then the nominee will pretty much be decided when Jupiter is on that Saturn. And so you can say, well, you know, Jupiter is on Saturn, but Saturn's in trine that Sun, trine that Pluto. So, you know, this could possibly be a hopeful time for her. However, when Jupiter meets Saturn, at the same time, Saturn itself is going to be up here on that Venus. And so I was just thinking, I'm not so sure that this is going to be a point when she's going to get what she wants, in spite of the trine, because you think Jupiter kind of hits a wall when it hits Saturn here. It almost seems more to me like she's going to be at the point where she does have some delegates that she can turn over to someone else, show her support behind someone else, so that even though she's meeting a defeat here in Saturn, she's able to walk away in a good position, unscathed. Just my guess there. But to truly see where the metal meets the road here, let's look to see her chart on January 25th, January 20th, 2025, when the next president will be inaugurated. So we'll look at her chart is on the inside, and the chart of the inauguration is on the outside of the chart. We've got, at this point, notice this Jupiter, which I thought was a little problematic when it reached her, Saturn, at this point has moved into Gemini, not doing a whole lot to help her chart. In fact, it's kind of shooting up a ray here in square to her Pisces planets, and also sending a ray to the midpoint of that Jupiter Neptune. And then what is Neptune doing at the same time but making a square to her Jupiter? So that kind of indicates to me some disappointment on this day, that her hopes and expectations, that Jupiter dissolving here in square to Neptune. She's approaching a Jupiter opposition where she's going to need to regroup a bit, adjust her expectations. So I think with those things all indicating maybe not so much that this is her time. Also notice that Saturn and Venus are also kind of piling on here, creating that T-square to the Sagittarius planets. And also notice another thing that's happening on Inauguration Day is that Jupiter and Saturn are having their first, their separating square. The conjunction, that began in January of 2020, which December of 2020, which may have, being on her Sun, kicked off her kind of inner thought, oh, maybe I could be president. that's really reaching a square at this point. I think it's interesting, don't you, that with Jupiter, Saturn having their waxing square at the next inauguration can suggest a kind of pivot and who our leader will be. But that's just kind of speculation on my part at this point. But you say, but what about what's going on up here? We've got this Sun Pluto conjunction right on her sun. This is her solar return after all, January 20th, 2025. But, every inauguration day is her solar return. So you think, well, it's on her sun, it's on her north node, Pluto's right there. We've got that T-square. It's setting off that grand trine in her chart. At this point, surely that could be someone becoming president. But just a couple of things. One is, remember, this is kind of a wobbly grand trine. Saturn has not quite perfected in its trine to Pluto yet. It's an out of sign trine. So there's that conflict between something staying the same and something moving forward and being new, operating at that time. But Pluto crossing one's sun, any of you out there ever had a Pluto crossing one's sun? Usually it doesn't bring something that we've been working on for a long time. Usually it brings a renovation project. It usually tears something down that we've been building and puts us on a path to rebuilding something new. So I suspect that she is going to be at a point where she's regrouping on Inauguration Day, thinking, okay, I tried this. What's my next story? Where do I start my next chapter? She's wonderfully positioned, with all this power in her chart to move on to something else. And remember, she's wired to be very important in this next 20 years of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. But I just don't think her hand's going to be on the Bible on Inauguration Day in 2025. So anyway, I will put a marker on this. I'll set a reminder to myself and check back on January 20th, 2025 to see if Nikki Haley is being inaugurated on that day. So thank you very much for joining me. Take care. Bye.